What is up, you guys? So this is now my recap of the 2026 Arlington Supercross just outside of Dallas. I didn't get to see any of it because I ended up going to another Hawaii men's basketball game that night, and it was against the UC Santa Barbara Gauchos, and that turned out to be a win as well. But this time, I'm going to get this out of the way right now. But first off, guys, remember, subscribe if you think that I'm worth listening to, or if you just want to see some more of my games. I will try to have one up on Saturday. But in the meantime, let's get into this. I'm going to start out with the 250s this time. Pierce Brown wins in comeback fashion. Joe Shimoda was robbed, but Honda has no leg to stand on. I'm going to get this one out of the way now. Joe Shimoda was leading, and it was good to see him back out there in time for the East Division. And I had a feeling that Joe was going to be in for the East Coast if he healed up in time. And fortunately, he did, especially after coming back from a neck injury that could very well have ended his career. Wow, second place was great for Joe, although he did have a problem with the red lights on, and there is some people out there who think he would have won. But unfortunately, I'm one of those people who think Joe should have won, but unfortunately got messed up by the red lights. The unfortunate part is, after looking at some other videos on Instagram, where I think it was Luke Clout who had made a mistake and jumped into the other lane and was at the bottom of the finish line jump. So this is Luke Clout right here, and he's coming up. He ricochets into the other lane and has to do a U-turn at the top of the finish line jump, which forced Shimoda to roll. And I do think that Joe was in the right on that. And I sympathize with Honda. Believe me, I do. But unfortunately, I don't think they have a leg to stand on, in my opinion. Because while I do think that Joe was robbed, I do also think that the AMA probably played it right, and so did Joe. There was no penalty issued, but I can understand why Honda would be as upset as they are. Had Joe gone back around Pierce Brown, I don't think they would have been too upset as they were, but still, that was unfortunate, and the rules are the rules. But at the same time, I don't think that Pierce Brown is going to have that win overturned anytime soon. Not like what happened to Ryan Dungey when he jumped on a red cross flag and was docked 2 spots at Detroit 2016. And Dungey became the first guy in history to have a win stripped from him. And I think the AMA has decided from that point on that whoever wins it fair and crosses the finish line first, wins it fair and square. And that's understanding. But at this time, I don't know. I'm a little in between on that. But I can understand why Honda was as mad as they were. And you can't blame them. And I sympathize with Joe because he thinks he could have won. But still, I don't think Honda has much of a leg to stand on, like I said. But I can understand why they'd be upset. And Joe gave it a good fight, make no mistake. But unfortunately, that red light coming on kind of messed him up a little bit more than it should. But getting back to the start, my pick for the 250 East title, Seth Hamaker, he was really lucky to get through that first turn in one piece, and he turns it into a 4th place finish. Now, like I said, Seth Hamaker is my pick to win the 250 East Championship, or whatever division he ran, and in this case, he chose the East. And while I do think that fourth place was a good start, I do think he could have made the podium. But props to Daxton Bennick for holding on. And this guy can do great things, especially now in that Rockstar Husqvarna. I do think that Bennick is going to be in for a great season and maybe have a little bit better season than he had on Star Yamaha. Of course, he was coming back for some injuries, but still, it was a good ride for Daxton. And Seth, I do think, kind of felt things out. And like I said, I do think he could have podiumed, but I think a fourth place, you got to be happy with that at the same time. And while I do think that Seth is going to win some races, I still think that he's going to win this championship because he really came into his own a year ago. But as for Pierce Brown, holy moly, after his season last year didn't really exist after he crashed out of the opener at Tampa, oh man, that's a feel-good story in its own right for Pierce Brown. And I hope that's the beginning of his career getting back on the right track. And for Pierce to, of course, he benefited from the red lights, but part of me feels that the AMA did the right thing in the 250s, but after the 450s, I don't think they did. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit. All right, now to the 450 class. Hunter Lawrence wins first career 450 Supercross. No penalty on red cross flag is ludicrous. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to get into that first. Like I said, the unfortunate part is the AMA has a long history of inconsistent rulings, and this was one of them. I think back to the 2024 St. Louis Supercross when Jet Lawrence won the second main event, but there was a red cross flag out as he took the checkered flag and was docked to position, and the win went to Eli Tomac in the second main event. And this is one time where I really disagree with no penalties for jumping on a red cross flag. However, I can also think back to 2000 in Indianapolis when Jeremy McGrath was leading and had jumped during a red cross flag, but it hadn't come out yet. And even though the red cross flags were waving, McGrath still jumped the finish line jump while Isaiah Johnson was down, and they didn't make any rules there, or they didn't make any infractions then. So the way that you have to have the red cross flag out, I get it, but if that AMA official didn't see Eli Tomac jumping the finish line jump, I'll go ahead and give him the benefit of the doubt. But if the red cross flag is out, you got to single the jumps, okay? But for Tomac to not be penalized is just another notch on the AMA's belt of inconsistent rulings. Some I agree with, some I don't. And this is one of them where I don't agree with. Now to the other one. Hunter Lawrence finally gets it done. I wondered if he was ever going to win a race before his brother Jet returns to Supercross. And I have a feeling that he will be back pretty soon, maybe in the latter portion of or maybe the final quarter of the season, but we'll see what happens. But for Hunter, he really earned that one, that's for sure. And to hear that Ken Roczen was a little under the weather and he was still riding as good as he was to hold the lead as long as he did, if you're Hunter Lawrence, you might think on one side of the coin that somebody's giving you bad information because nothing seemed to be wrong with Ken Roczen. But once it got towards the end, he started fading again. And this has kind of been a trademark of Ken Roczen, whether he's 100% healthy or not. When he gets to the end of the race, he starts to get winded. And to be honest, that's kind of been why he's lost as many races as he has to Cooper Webb, especially in Arlington. And Cooper Webb with a third place ride I could see the disappointment on his face because he made one little mistake in one of the rhythm sections, and that was enough for Hunter Lawrence to get by him. But if you're Cooper Webb, to be honest, I don't know if there was anything he could have done to prevent that. But still, he had a good ride, and I think he should still be really pleased with the outcome of the race in general. See, I always knew that Hunter Lawrence had it in him, but he just had to have the right breaks come his way. And what do you know? It did. So congrats to Hunter. I hope that's the first of many, and he won't be a one-hit wonder. You know, kind of like guys like Damon Huffman and Andrew Short. But to be frank, that was a good ride by Hunter. And if he didn't win this one, I didn't see him winning one of these races, one of these Supercross races before the season had ended. So it was a good ride for him. But as for Chase Sexton, I don't know what is going on at Factory Kawasaki. But after hearing that Jake Weimer had an interview where Kawasaki was not giving him what he truly wanted as far as bike setup goes, that goes to show that Chase Sexton is fighting his bike a lot, and maybe that Team Kawasaki has a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing, because when you're not feeling comfortable on the bike, it can make for a long night. But if you're comfy on the bike, then that'll be the best night of your life. And Chase has proved that the Cowie can win, but he's only done it once, which is unfortunate. And that's been his only podium so far. And James Stewart seems to think that Chase Sexton is fighting a bike setup problem. I seem to think so too. And I also think that on one side of the coin, a lot of it is boiling down to his starts, and they have been completely lethargic. I have not really seen a good start out of Sexton since probably winning Anaheim 2. Now he's out for Daytona. I'm not sure if he's going to be out for the season, for the rest of the season, but his championship hopes are pretty much done anyway. But if I'm Sexton right now, I'm getting back as soon as I can and at least trying to get a win and take out some of the sting this season has really caused him. And that's where I'll leave it. So anyway, guys, that's all for today. And remember, subscribe. We'll see you all for Daytona.